writer, but I am one of the slowest typists on the planet. You know, I'm, like this, because I never learned how to type, and I started off on a manual typewriter. I wrote my first 3 novels on a manual typewriter. And see, that's how old I really am. Some of you maybe you've never even seen a manual typewriter. But, you know, that's back in the days when there were operators on telephones and things like that, you know. But yeah, I'm back doing this. And Chris now tells me I sometimes get 3 fingers on each side going, which the minute she says that, of course, I'm right back to 1. Because I just, you know, that'll, chewing gum and walking, someone mentions it and you're in deep trouble. So anyhow, this point of writing into the dark, about in the early 90s, I started, Chris and I also started 2 major publishing companies along the way, Pulp House Publishing and now WMG. But WMG is an indie publisher. It's just basically our publishing house. We have 7 employees and all of that, and we make an enormous amount of money. So the aspect of this writing into the dark came about because I thought what I was doing was weird. I never talked to other writers. Writers in that period of time didn't communicate a lot with each other except once in a while on business. And so I started, you know, talking to old timers, people who, most of which are now dead, you know, or people at my generation, and started asking them what their process was. And at first they wouldn't tell me. Because if you were a group of readers that were my fans and reading my books, you know, under any one of my numbers of pen names, I would not be saying this. I wouldn't be giving this talk to readers. But you guys are all writers. And so it's fair and it's safe for me to give this talk. Because, you know, readers, what you tell readers is, oh, I struggled on that book. Man, I used 3 or 4 drafts on that. Oh, it took me a long time. Yeah, I started that book 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, I wrote 18 books in 1 year for traditional publishers. I've done more than that in indie. And so, you know, but readers want to know, before they spend their hard-earned money, that you worked on the book that they're going to enjoy. That you spent some time, that it was important to you. They don't want to know that you wrote it in 5 days. They don't want to know this. So when you're talking to readers, and that's why you hear all the big name writers out there talking about how many drafts they do. Guys, Lawrence Block said it right. We tell lies for fun and profit. That's what we do. And when we're talking to, if this was a room of readers that were my fans on my books, and I got 23 million copies of my books in print. Okay, and so if you guys were part of that group, I would be telling you how hard I worked on a book. I'd be telling you how much research I did. I'd be telling you I did numbers of drafts. But you're writers. So I'm going to tell you the truth. And this is the truth that I got from a lot of those old-time pros when I pushed them. Usually after a couple drinks, sitting in a bar, when there were no readers around, no fans around, nobody else like that, I could usually get them to talk. And often I discovered that my method wasn't so strange after all. It was not weird. I do 1 draft clean. That's what I do. 1 draft clean. Now, I thought my method of getting to 1 draft clean was what was very weird. I'm a cycler, and I'll explain that in a second here. But I do 1 draft clean. And so when I get to the end, I never look at it again. The biggest hate that I have about writing is that when someone makes me look at one of my own books again. I know what happened. I wrote the thing. You know, I wrote it for myself. I entertained myself for a while. I'm done. I'm going to go entertain myself again with another book. I don't need to read the dumb thing again. You know? And boy, traditional publishing was always making you read it 2 and 3 and 4 times. No, not in indie. No. I've got people trained. I don't ever see my books again. I release it. Chris reads it. I look at her comments once in a while and say, yeah, that's a good one. No, I'm not going to do that. You know, and that sort of stuff. And then I turn it in. I turn it into the people that are doing our production work. And that's it. I'm done. I'm done. I never look at it again. Which, if you think about it, think how much more time I have. I'm really slow writer. I'm a slow typist. I write about 800 to 1,000 words an hour when I'm really roaring along, you know, and so yet I'm considered enormously prolific. Well, that's because I spend more time in the chair writing, and I also don't waste any time. I never look at a book again. So how do I do that? I never outline. Oh, shudder. Makes me shudder thinking back to traditional publishing, especially in the media, is I had to outline everything to get approval. So this is what I would do. I would outline a book. It would go off to some media thing like Star Trek or Men in Black or whatever. And then it'd come back and it'd be approval. And I'd go, yay, got the contract, got the first check. Because you never started writing until you got the check from traditional publishing. Oh, good, never. And so I'd get the check, and then I'd say, okay, now I can start. And I'd never look at the outline. I wouldn't look at the outline. I wanted to write my book, you know. And so I'd write the book, and I'd turn it in. Not once. Not once. And 100 and some books doing it that way. Did anybody ever complain? And if an editor wanted to rewrite, you know what I would do? Because they had to, because it's called cash flow in big businesses. I'm not going to get into that. But they had to ask for a rewrite, no matter how good the book was. They had to ask for a rewrite in traditional publishing. And so what I would do is I would look at the very first thing the editor said. I would fix that. I'd fix the very last thing. Take me about 10 minutes. I'd put it in a drawer for 4 weeks so that they thought I was working really hard on it. And I'd write another novel. And then I'd pull that back out of the drawer. And then I'd pull it up and say, oh, wow, these were fantastic ideas. This really helped the book get a lot better. And I'd write this glowing letter back, send it back. Nobody ever noticed because nobody ever read it again. So I always managed to keep my own books in my own way. So I'm very proud of all those media books I did under a lot of different names and a lot of different stuff. Excuse me. But the aspect about learning how to do this is that you have to clear out a lot of stuff. You have to clear out what I call the myths. Now, I've done series of articles on my blog. I've got books out called Killing the Sacred Cows of Publishing. You know, and those things are, the sacred cows are, you must rewrite. That's sacred cow number one. That's just hooey. That's set up by English teachers because they're too damn lazy to grade another paper again. So they don't want their students writing more than one paper, so they'll have them rewrite the same thing over and over and over again. I can tell you exactly in 1890s where that started in a bunch of essays. It didn't exist before 1890s. The dime novels, the penny dreadfuls, all those that were coming up, all hundreds of years. The pulp writers never rewrote. None of the pulp writers that rewrote that you still read to this day, all of those are first draft on manual typewriters. Not electric typewriter, manual. Those are all first drafts. The Max Brands and on. You know, the Burroughs, everything. You know, a lot of it's dated, sure, because it was from a different era. But it's still selling today. And that's amazing when you actually think about it. So what you have to get out of the way is a lot of the myths. That there isn't a one of us, I am no exception to this, that doesn't fight myths. We fight them all the time because they're prevalent in us. We were taught it by somebody. We don't even know where we took it in. We don't even know how we took it in. And those myths appear in what I call the critical voice. The voice that's negative. Oh, this is a pile of garbage. Oh, this is awful. Oh, I can't write this. Oh, I don't know how to write this. You know, all those negative thoughts. And it doesn't matter how they manifest inside of each of you. We all have them. We all have them. We are the worst judges of our own work. Why? Because the story's up here. The story other people read are in a bunch of black-coded marks on the page. That's what we're all learning how to do. That's why you want to keep learning craft, learning technique, learning everything else so you can be better at those little coded marks. Okay? But the reason is when you read those little coded marks, the story in your head comes back. Well, that doesn't mean that that same exact story is going to appear in somebody else's head. That's why we are the worst judges of our own work. We have to let other people. And that's why you let the readers decide. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Who cares? Write the next thing. Writing, here's another myth. I'm going to clear out a couple myths here and then move on to how to do this. Writing's fun. You sit alone in a room and make stuff up. That's your job description. You sit alone in a room and make stuff up. And people pay you enormous amounts of money to do it. They pay me enormous amounts of money to do it, you know, and I've been doing it for 30 years. And I just think, how did I get here? I mean, I worked really hard cleaning out mess for a long time. But now I sit alone in a room and make stories up. And people pay me money for it. That's not work. Sorry. But there comes a whole bunch of mess. Because if you're making money, it should be work. And work should be hard. No, I don't think so. But that's how we're all trained. There's part of that myth. Especially, like I grew up very poor, very lower middle class. And if you grew up that way, oh my God, what you did is you went 8 hours to a job, and you worked 8 hours, and then you barely had enough to get by, and then you worked 8 more hours, and you barely had enough to get by, and you got your paycheck, and that was work. How many people out here are calling their writing work? What are you doing to your writing? You're killing it. You're just killing it. You're making it something you want to escape from, not go to. Writing is fun. Don't call it work. Call it fun. Now, you're going to have issues with your family. I got that. I got that. I mean, you know, how do you say, oh, I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to go play for a while. And your family goes, well, you're not doing anything. You can help me here. So you sort of have to pretend it's a job. But it's not a job. I mean, you know, I've been doing this now I sold my first short story in 1874. I've been doing it since then. I hated to write before that point. And one day it dawned on me, this is great fun. Just sitting there entertaining myself. You know, I could do it in other ways, but this is cleaner. All right, one last myth in here, and then I'll move on to how to do this a little bit. Making your stories special snowflakes. Oh, I've been working on that novel for 3 years. Oh, I'm so sorry. Holy moly, in that time I wrote 30-some novels, and I can't remember any of the titles, let alone what they're about. That's another advantage getting older. You know, but I mean, think about it. I've written 200-some novels and 400 or 500 short stories. Go ahead, try to remember any of that. No, I can't remember any of that. I can remember general categories I wrote. I read a lot of, you know, superhero stuff with my poker boy. I write, you know, a lot of Star Trek back in the day, you know, things like that, but I don't remember any titles. Someone says, what book would you recommend of yours? I get that regularly, you know, from fans and stuff, and I go, I don't know, I can't remember any of them. I just entertain myself and let it go. So I have gotten past the problem of making any one book a special snowflake. It's just not. It's just a book. It's just a story. See the myth? But it's my story, and it's special. Yeah, for that moment in time. Give it your best, and then release. And that's what a lot of this conference is about, is the 20 books to 50K. You know? Yeah, you got to learn how to release. So that's a big myth. Well, I got a hunch that I'm speaking to the choir on that one, at this conference anyhow. All right, so the goal. The goal here is to write clean copy, one draft, with absolutely no rewrites and no outlining. No outline, clean copy, one draft, release. Whole bunch of you. I could see the little thought balloons. I can't do that. I got to know where I'm going. How does he even start a book? I'm just like Papa Moodles. It would have been so great to have this animated. See the billion thought balloons pop up on that one. But that's the goal. One draft. No outline. Clean copy. Release. That's simple. That hard. It really is that hard. How do you do it? Well, let's start off. Let me tell you how I get stories. Everybody has a trigger. Sometimes you know, for a story, sometimes a story pops in as a character, for some people. Sometimes it pops in as a scene. For me, it's a title, or it's a word. But usually for me, it's a title. I usually just tend to get a title. I take a whole, I used to collect magazines. You know, I had Chris and I probably still do, because I don't think we've sold any of them, every digest of science fiction, fantasy, and horror and mystery that was ever done, from the first digest in 1943. And we had them all the way up to the turn of the century. So I'd go into that collection, I'd pull out a group of them, and I'd just look at the titles and go, and I'd take a half title. I'd never take a full title. I'd take a half title, write it down on a big sheet of paper, write a bunch of them down. I'd get 15 sheets of paper. I'd spend a couple hours doing this. And then I'd just take a half title and jam it into another half title. You know, In the Shade. And then there was another one that had Slow Boat. So I wrote a story called In the Shade of the Slow Boat Man. Very distinctive title. Won me all kinds of awards. It's making me more money than I think about. Been optioned all kinds of times. It was made into a play. You know, that sort of stuff. And it just came out of In the Shade and Slow Boat. In the Shade of the Slow Boat Man. Sat down, wrote it in about 2.5 hours. It's probably made me $25,000 or $30,000 over the years from one short story that I wrote in a couple hours. So, you need a trigger. That's all you need. Get yourself started. Fire on. Whatever you use as a trigger. Some people use little like, oh, the character's going to run into an iceberg. Okay? Now, write the novel to get the character to running into an iceberg. You know, that sort of stuff. All of us are different. You start off into the dark. We got to the title of this panel finally. You start writing into the dark. Some people call it pantsing. I have trouble even saying that word. That's so stupid. No, you're writing into the dark. You don't have any idea where it's going. You're not outlined it. You didn't have any idea. You're just going. And so what happens is you have a lot of fun going on for a little while. And then you kind of grind down. Then you go, oh, where's it going next? Don't think that. That's the thing that you have to guard against. You don't want to know where it's going next. Okay? When you think about when you're sitting reading a book, and you got to the end of a chapter, do you put the book down and go, oh, I wonder where that's going next. I better figure that out. Why? No. You just turn the page and read the next chapter. Okay? So your writing process needs to become like your reading process. They need to replicate each other because we're all readers first. So your writing process becomes like your reading process. Just keep going. Now, how do you do this? How do you get any kind of depth in there? How do you add stuff in? Well, it's actually quite simple. And this is the part that I thought I was so weird about when I started talking to other long-term pros back in the 90s, and they just kept talking and discovering that when you get them a couple drinks in them, they'll tell you how they actually write in private. And this is how most of them write. I call it cycling. I call it cycling. And it's very, very simple. You go on. Everybody has their own length, I've discovered. All the pros have their own length. They have a different type thing. My length tends to be about 400 to 500 words. I'll be going along, and at about 500 words, I just kind of grind to a stop. So, we are like, I assume a lot of you have read Kurt Vonnegut. He wrote a novel called Slaughterhouse-Five. Slaughterhouse-Five is Billy Pilgrim, and he's unstuck in the timeline of his own life. Now, it's a war novel. You know, Vonnegut had all that. But at the same time, the theory about being unstuck in your own timeline of your own life is really fascinating when you apply it here. Because you've got a timeline of a story going on. Readers start on word one and end on the last word. They have a timeline. The man just draw a straight line there. That's a timeline. But you are the god of your own work. So I go about 500 words, I grind down, I come up out of the timeline, and I go back in creative voice. No negative thoughts, no, oh, this is a piece of shit, nothing. I just come out, and I'm still in creative writing voice, and I go back, and I go through it again, touching it, adding a little here. I'm an adder-inner, so I usually add in more depth, more setting, more this. And I come through, and by the time I get back to that 500-word point, I have momentum, and I go another 400 or 500 words before I grind to a halt, and I come out of the timeline of the novel, and I cycle back, maybe not quite as far, and I do it again. And so my writing process is just loop, 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 and when I get to the end, I'm done. I had to learn early on because people were telling me, your endings are kind of weak. I'm thinking, oh, why would that? Oh, I don't cycle at the end. Because I was so excited about finishing. So now I at least get to the end, pop up out of the timeline, go back 5, and then add in through the ending. Don't forget that last cycle, just because you're excited about finishing. But you just cycle. And writer, long-term writer after long-term writer after long-term writer told me this was how they did it. And I thought I was the weirdest writer on the planet that I was doing it that way. I wasn't telling anybody. Oh my God, I would never tell anybody, like in my workshops or my friends, that I was doing that. Oh heavens. And it was hard on an electric typewriter early on, because me and whiteout became really good friends. I used to be covered with it. People would say, oh, you got white spots all over you, Dean. I'm like, oh, never mind. But it just whiteout, it just cycled all the way through. I'd just be fixing and going and adding and so when I write a novel, so the reader gets to go all the way through. Well, I get to something that, oh, wow, that's cool. Oh, that needed to be set up. Out of the timeline, back to the point it needs to be set up, drop back into the timeline, and fix it all the way through. It's very simple. I never have to know what's going on next. Because when I get to something cool, I go back and set it up. Makes me look really smart in my books. How did he figure out? He must have outlined that thing to death. No, I just fixed it as I went, all in creative voice, all cycling all the way through. Okay? That's how you do it. Now, when you get stuck, totally stuck, and you've cycled back and you're still stuck, what do? Don't try to figure out what's going to happen next. That will freeze you up. That allows the critical voice in. That allows all kinds of stuff. Plus, it just takes a lot of time. Trying to figure out, oh, what's the plot of this book? Oh, it just takes an enormous amount of time, and you have to worry about it, and you have to drive your spouse nuts and everything else. Don't do that. What do? Write the next line. Literally, it is that simple. Write the next line. You look at that last line and you say, what would logically come next? All right, I can write that line. Okay, what would logically come next? And then write the next line. What would logically come next? And then don't worry about what the big picture is. The minute you start thinking about the big picture, you're eating the elephant. Write the next line. It is that simple. And if you can remember to do that, which is always difficult, that's really the hard part of that one, is remembering when you're stuck, your first instinct is to, oh, I better figure out what happens next. No, write the next line. And eventually you write the next line, and then you write the next line, and pretty soon you're 250 words and going again. And you cycle back, and off you go. So that's the trick. Cycling and writing the next line. Before you can do any of this, however, you have to get all of the negative thoughts out. This is a positive process. It's 100% positive. You just can't do this with, oh, my writing sucks, or oh, I can never do setting, or oh, I can't do this, or oh. Anytime you hear the word can't, you're in the wrong direction. Or this is bad, you're in the wrong direction. You just can't do that. Everything about writing needs to be positive and fun. Is that difficult to get to? Yes. Because we're all writers and we were all trained that this must be work and it must be hard and you got to rewrite and you got to figure out what's ahead. Oh, you don't dare try to write a novel because guess what? You might waste words. Air quote. Because that's all those things are worth. Waste words. Excuse me? Why would you waste words? You don't waste words. They're all practice. Oh, I said the dirty word. I'm sorry. Craig, I'm so sorry I swore. I said the word practice in front of a bunch of writers. Oh, no. I'm sorry. I make fun of that all the time because you guys don't think about practicing, do you? But if you're, yet, a lot of you have played musical instruments and it didn't dawn on you to go out on a national stage and never practice. And yet that's what you're doing with your writing. You think, this is a special snowflake. I better put it out on the national stage because it's so perfect. And you've never practiced. You've never learned any techniques. You've never gone after anything. You just put out special snowflakes because they're special to you. You know, and sometimes they sell, and that's good. Because practice sessions for writers, we're lucky. Our practice sessions can sell. I have been practicing now for 40-some years. I never write a novel that I'm not practicing something. I'm not working at getting better at some level of craft. There is not one of these books that I write, not one of these short stories that I'm not practicing, working it better. Is there going to be some special book down the road that I don't need to practice on? No. No, I'll be practicing till I die because you can't learn it all in this industry, folks. The craziness about learning craft and publishing is the minute you learn one thing, you realize there's 50 things above you that you've got to learn now. And then you learn something over, and you think business is tough? You think the business of publishing is tough? Nah, it's easy compared to learning craft. Because craft, once you learn something, you realize, oh, how did so-and-so do that? How did that latest John Grisham novel even work? How did the latest King novel even work? I don't know. You got to figure that out. And then once you start figuring it out, you go, what is that? What's pacing? You know, most people don't even understand pacing. You know, most writers, and it takes a while to start learning that. Still have time. So you got to keep all the negative out. You got to clean out the myths of writing. All that negative, all that negativity. It's everywhere. And you'll hear it. You'll hear it all around. Every conference I've ever been to, writers are often talking negatively about something about their own writing. Okay? So rule number one, if I can give you nothing else in this 45 minutes or 40 minutes, rule number one, never speak one negative word about your own writing. Not one. Not one. Easy. Easy for me to say. Took me 20 years to learn that. Let me tell you another way that you can jump on this. Imagine taking a large horse and coating it completely with the slickest oil you can find, and then climb on it. No saddle, just climb on the horse. It's covered with this slick oil. Well, you're going to be fine as long as the horse is standing there, but the minute you try to move, you're going to fall off. The minute the horse moves, turns sideways, you fall off. You're holding on, you're gripping on. That is what it feels like to attempt Heinlein's rules. Heinlein's rules are 5 simple business rules that Heinlein came up with in 1943. Robert A. Heinlein, some of you might not even know who he is. But Robert A. Heinlein came up with in 1943 5 simple rules. Rule number 1, you must write. Rule number 2, you must finish what you write. Right there, that takes out all the wannabes and, oh, I would love to be a writer if I only had the time, and you know, and they can't finish. They're working on the same novel for decades. Rule number 1, you must write. Rule number 2, you must finish up what you write, and that drops millions of people off that slick horse. Rule number 3, you must not rewrite. Period. Rule number 4, you must put it on the market. Rule number 5, you must keep it on the market. Simple business rules. 1943, they still apply. Write, finish, don't rewrite, put it on the market, keep it on the market, which in indie publishing means refresh it, you know, once every 3 or 4 years. It's just like climbing on that horse. You'll fall off continuously. Continuously. I have been trying to live on top of Heinlein's rules since 1982. 1982. I believed and still do to this day, but I'll never tell anybody that except writers in a group like this, that everything I write is totally shit. Because number one, I'm not rewriting it to death. I'm not polishing it. Oh, I'm not making it good. Oh, I'm not looking at it again to make sure it's perfect. You know, I'm not in the pursuit of perfection. So I write, I finish what I write, I don't rewrite, I put it on the market, and I leave it on the market. It is really that simple. It is the slickest horse that you'll ever try to stay on. You could get all gung-ho. I get gung-ho regularly. I'm going to follow him. The one I fall off on, I can't stay on. 4. Number 4. Put it on the market. I just write for myself. I just have fun. I play. So what happens with my stuff? Oops. I finish it, give it to Chris. I think, oh, that's cool. And I forget to give it to anybody on the market. I can go through piles of paper on my desk and I'll find short stories that I wrote years ago that are perfectly fine. They should have been on the market years ago. I fall off of the horse on number 4 continuously. So that's how you do it. The goal is to write clean copy, 1 draft, put it on the market without an outline, without knowing where you're going. Now, I have a workshop called Writing into the Dark. It takes 6 weeks to get through what I just did here in 40 minutes, but of course it's a lot deeper. And we do a lot of online workshops on craft. We do a lot of online business workshops, as Craig was saying. And we just have a lot of things that we've been teaching that started off a long time ago, and they're just continuing to grow and continue on. So there are ways to discover about this, but do not expect to go to like a Stephen King or read a Stephen King book, you know, where he's talking to his fans and have him tell you anything but he really works hard and he does multiple drafts and he does this and he does that, because they won't tell you that. They won't tell you that. They will only tell you the truth on a one-on-one or a couple writers together in a quiet situation in a bar. And then you can get the long-term pros to tell you how they really work. I'm different. I'm up here because I think I wish someone would have told me this stuff when I was starting off. It would have saved me years, maybe a decade or more. That's all I'm doing this for. I know a lot of you won't agree with most of it, and that's perfectly fine. But just keep it in mind. When I'm writing 5 or 6 novels, and you're writing 1, who wins? That was sort of nasty, wasn't it? Yeah. Sorry. I've got a couple questions. We got a few minutes, and that's about it. Anybody got a question? You got to go to one of the microphones, I guess. This is going to get good.
Thank you very much. Can you quickly speak to what the difference for you is between not rewriting and doing the indie refresh, the rule?
Refresh means take a look at the covers, look at your blurbs, bring it up to the genre standard of the time. Genres are constantly changing. You know, get it up to the genre standard. I would never look at rewrite a book.
Got it.
No, God, no. In fact, I just published my first novel that came out in 1987. And I published it. I literally gave it to somebody in our publishing house and said, type it in word for word. Don't change a word unless it's a typo in the original paperback. I want it as it was in 1987 because that is, for me, where I was at in 1987. And that's perfectly fine. We're all growing. Hopefully you're growing. So every book becomes a mark along the road, just like a signpost to where you were that year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dean, I've taken a number of your workshops, and one of the things that you didn't mention here that I thought really helped me was you outline as you're writing.
Yes.
And I just wanted to bring that up because it's so
important. Sort of I didn't have enough time, but yeah. What I do is as I'm going along so I can keep track of, you know, old guy, real bad memory. What I do is I go along and I finish a chapter. So on a yellow piece of paper, usually a bigger pad, what I do is I write what the character was in that chapter and that I just finished. I don't write out ahead, just what I finish. And I write what happened in that chapter, what the character was, what they were wearing. So I don't have to scroll back to figure out what the heck they were wearing. I just do it on a thing right beside my computer. Every time I finish a chapter, I just scroll a little note, chapter 1, chapter 2. So I outline after I write it. Yeah.
How does your method work when you're writing a series? Because I feel like I need to outline.
Same exact thing.
But I feel like I need to know how it ends.
And there's the problem. Sorry to be so blunt, but yeah, that's exactly the problem. Why would you want to know how it ends? That's your critical voice talking. The critical voice, the minute
the momentum going.
The minute the critical voice makes a decision for you, it's the wrong one, because the critical voice is going to make the safe decision. The critical voice in all of us is designed to keep us safe. That's the voice that says, "Oh, don't go and run off that cliff. Don't run out in the middle of the street." That's the parental voice. Okay, and so when the parental voice makes a decision for your writing, it's always wrong. The critical voice is a bad thing. The creative voice, however, is that little kid in the back that's just playing. Let it go. Make it up. Series. I have 6 or 7 different series, all written into the dark. I just go from where I was in the last book, and let's make up the next one. And just, and you world build as you go by outlining as you go. You world build as you go, not ahead of time, as you go. There's another problem that a lot of people will. Yeah. Quick question here. Yeah.
Just to follow on from that question, though, you spoke about cycling back. So you think of a great idea, you set it up, you go back through to set it up. In a series, you're on book 3, and you think, that's really something I should have introduced in book 1. Book 1's now on the market, so how do you
leave it alone?
Cycle through a
Just
series in that way?
Yeah, just leave it alone. Come up with something why it should have been introduced at that point. You're the god of your own work, folks. Make it up. Yeah.
I don't have a team to pass my editing onto, so at one point,
You don't have a what?
I don't have a team to pass my editing onto.
What the hell's a team? Oh, you mean a publishing team? Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you draw the line between editing and rewriting? And at what point should I stop worrying about?
You get a copy editor who fixes typos.
And that's it?
That's it. Why would you want anybody else touching your work? You're the artist. You're the artist. Do not let anybody else tell you how to write a novel or how to write a story or anything else. Hire an editor to fix typos. Nothing more. Have a backbone. Believe in your own work, folks. Believe in your own work. And on that, I have to end. So, thank you, folks. And I don't know how to answer.